Today's launch of the Transformative Preservation Guide is a part of Black and Historic Preservation's Member Talk series. Thank you for joining us. Feel free, if you haven't already done so, to introduce yourself in the chat. This is the schedule we'll follow for today's event. I'll do a brief welcome, and then we'll roll into real brief descriptions of Black and Historic Preservation, as well as our main collaborator on the guide, the Black Grassroots Heritage Preservation Network. A reminder about Black and Historic Preservation's community agreement. A link to the agreement is in the announcements. Similar to a community agreement is this disclaimer that the topic for tonight's discussion does what the venerated author and advocate James Baldwin encouraged the artist to do, which is to illuminate the darkness. As it relates to historic preservation, Black and Historic Preservation is illuminating harms specific to Black preservationists and Black historic sites and their sense of belonging in the field, with language of historical precision. This form of history communication is how we practice our pledge to unredact the facts by using the active voice instead of the passive, and other tenets of unredaction to interpret historical harms and resulting traumas. To that end, I will say white people, specifically white preservationists. Therefore, this request for my health and for your health, adopted from a Black life coach, applies tonight and for future watching of the recording of this event, and applies for reading and using this guide. And this was a comment thread that the life coach shared actually today in great timing for tonight's talk. So this is the full message that she shared on Threads. And here's the condensed user-friendly version for this presentation setting. This also appears in the Transformative Action section of the guide on practicing mental health. So I'm happy to practice it tonight. You might notice if you read the request carefully, it is a request that is not exclusive to white people. It is reciprocal, for reciprocal care. In essence, the request is for you to evaluate your nervous system's capacity to hear language of accountability about historical harms and traumas. Presumably, you are here because you have assessed that you have the capacity to be present for the topics covered by this guide. However, if you believe you might feel defensive about hearing the words white preservationists in the context of the harms white preservationists have caused Black preservationists, for your well-being and my own as I maneuver being in a space of accountability and vulnerability, please leave this event and watch the recording when your nervous system is more regulated. If you are watching this as a recording, please stop the recording and return after you have processed any feelings of defensiveness that is arising inside of you. Thank you. So a few learning objectives to share with you. There are two learning objectives mainly, and they both center around learning more about historic preservation and transformative actions that we're presenting in the guide to evolve the field. So for the next 10 minutes, I will share a little about Black and Historic Preservation, followed by Marcus P. Smith, who will give a brief overview of the Black Grassroots Heritage Preservation Network. From there, I will provide an overview of the guide, discuss the guide briefly with Marcus, and then we will answer your questions and any reflections you have about the guide as well. Please place the questions in the Q&A section. Black and Historic Preservation is a resource by, for, and about Black preservationists and heritage conservationists and the greater preservation field. This is a resource for the field. And so, if I didn't already introduce myself, my name is Kennedy Whiters. I'm the founding director of Black and Historic Preservation. It's a program of my preservation studio, wrkSHap kiloWatt. I lead the studio as well as Black and Historic Preservation and my New York-based historic preservation architecture firm with over 20 years of experience in architecture, preservation, planning, and project management. On January 27th, 2021, Nikita Reed and I, two Black women and two preservation architects, hinted at the launch of a new program with this Instagram post featuring the Black and Historic Preservation logo that I designed. The following week in February, we co-launched the Black Preservationist Directory that I developed with the assistance of beta testers, fellow Black women in historic preservation, and the rest has been history. Since 2021, I've been the sole founder, growing the program's offerings from the Black Preservationist Directory to a job board, from the request from fellow preservationists requesting a job board, as well as a grant program and a paid membership program that provides members and supporters access to resources such as the job board and an opportunity to meet other Black preservationists from across the country in our quarterly meet and greets. Our current team includes myself and Marcus P. Smith. He's a history PhD candidate at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and the founder of the Black Grassroots Heritage Preservation Network. Before we continue, let's define historic preservation. So historic preservation is a conversation with our past about our future. That's how the National Park Service, the federal agency that is our main national leader in historic preservation, is how they've defined historic preservation in 2024. Historic preservation is also referred to as built heritage conservation. And heritage conservation, if you're unfamiliar with this term, it tends to be defined as storytelling about the built environment that emphasizes its embodied cultural value. And so Black and historic preservation combines these two definitions to state that historic preservation is storytelling about the built environment that tells as full a story as possible, spelling out embodied cultural heritage with more obtainable language to the general public by saying embodied cultural heritage also means to tell as full a story as possible. Our Preservation and Belonging Research Lab produces research that interrogates the status quo in the preservation enterprise and that supports a sense of belonging in the field. At its core, each of the research initiatives focus on narrative change, which is a key transformative action for supporting a sense of belonging in the field for people who have not necessarily historically felt welcome, like Black preservationists. Our core values are Black agency and community, well-being and equity, equity meaning racial, pay, and gender, and preservation for all. And these member talks are one way that we practice all three core values. These statistics are the inspiration for the core values. Typical statistics that people share when discussing the preservation of Black heritage sites and Black preservationists are 4% and 2%, where 4% is the percentage of historic preservation professionals in the US who identify as Black, 2% is the percentage of the approximate 95,000 places on the National Register of Historic Places whose nomination forms identify known association with Black people and Black life in the US, meaning that there is more to discover, many times hidden in plain sight in the archives of the association that historic sites have with Black people and Black life in the US. The other two statistics are ones that I have used and researched to apply to the development of the core values. The 15% relates to supporting pay equity, meaning the 15% is the Black to white racial wealth gap, and 35% is the percentage of Black and Indigenous people in the US who reported experiencing everyday discrimination. And so that is there as inspiration to make sure that we are supporting the well-being of Black preservationists in the field. The year 2026 marks 60 years since the passage of the National Historic Preservation Act, USA 250, and 5 years of Black and historic preservation. The theme for our 2026 programs has been preservation, because we have been acknowledging with our programming that Black people have been preservationists since before the National Historic Preservation Act's passage. If you missed our Ben Preservation talk featuring Dr. Tara Dudley, and Dr. Brian Whetstone, you can watch a recording of this event on our YouTube page. In February, we kicked off bin preservation with our Black Preservation Ancestors Profile Series, starting with the founder of Black History Month, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, adding to his legacy that he was a Black preservationist. Many of these ancestors are unknown to the general public, or known, yet few know of their preservation activity, nor view them as preservationists. So we are changing that narrative. Our programs are made possible in part by a grant from the Richard H. Dreyhouse Foundation and via our paid members, individual members, and individual supporters, as well as nonprofit organization supporters. So we thank you so much for your financial support. Please complete the feedback form after attending this event. You will receive a link to the form and a link to the recording via email. If you need continuing education units, you have the option to request a certificate in the form to self-report. Please do not screen record this presentation. Again, we are recording, so recording will be available. However, you may take a photo of the screen and post it to social media. If you do so, please tag us on Instagram. Our tag is right there. And with that, I will now invite Marcus to the stage to share a bit about the Black Grassroots Heritage Preservation Network. Again, they are the main collaborator on the Transformative Preservation Guide.
So first and foremost, I want to offer a huge thank you to Kennedy for the opportunity to collaborate on this guide, but also providing a short kind of platform to talk about the work of the Black Grassroots Heritage Preservation Network as we get into things. And I'm very excited to talk about everything that's been going on. So first and foremost, I am the founder of the BGHPN. I am a PhD candidate in the W. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies and also the Public History Graduate Certificate Program. I'm currently located in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, working with the Du Bois Freedom Center to restore the Clinton Amy Zion Church in hopes of building a museum dedicated to the life and legacy of the Black scholar activist W.E. Du Bois, as well as the broader Black history of the Berkshires. I'm also the co-chair of the Grassroots Public History Award Committee for the National Council on Public History. And so my work, as I see it, in the development of the BGHPN is also intimately tied to my scholarship and what I hope to be the activist work that we're doing. A key part of this is, what is BGHPN? So we are a digital stellatoring advocacy and interactive mapping platform, which seeks to amplify grassroots preservationists and community-led projects across the United States. So we aim to promote Black preservation of Black culture and historical heritage, advocate for protecting Black cultural sites and communities, and then confronting the erasure of Black histories by fostering a unified network that supports individuals, groups, and organizations committed to preserving Black heritage. And there are three main ways that we do this, with more to come. And I'm also happy to say that we are celebrating our first anniversary, which was May 22nd of last year. So it's been a whirlwind year. And so what we think about, particularly concerning our interactive mapping, which I'll talk about in a second, and the podcasting as well, and the website as we develop out our kind of digital infrastructure. We think of technology as a power and not neutral infrastructure that can be used to the benefit of marginalized and underrepresented groups, particularly when it comes to historic preservation and documenting community narratives. Secondly, community authority over design and narrative. There's a lot to talk about in the nitty gritty, but one of the key things, for example, is that for every interview we do in oral history style, meeting the archival standards for accessioning, all of our narrators are also identified as co-authors to be able to use that information as they wish. And so it's also about both activating and making information publicly accessible through either it be through the interactive map or through the audio medium. Countering erasure embedded in data systems. So one of the things we kind of think about is this kind of archival asymmetry or erasure by neglect. And one way to think about this is, okay, if someone has an oral history, if they have a object that's donated to a museum, without a strategic plan in terms of when and how that will be showcased in the community relation to it, it might as well not even be there, right? And so we think about how we can both address this by making things publicly accessible through a digital platform, but we're also asking ourselves the kind of question or idea is that sometimes misinterpretation of data is also just as bad as not having data at all. And so the next thing we think about is the power of storytelling. We believe that being able to communicate stories, and I think the emphasis of BGHPN is really about communication and community building, that through these storytelling, by this community building, that we can affect active change both in our local communities and our broader communities. And then preservation, most importantly, as a presence tense struggle, identifying people in communities who are not only preserving historic structures, but who are also trying to approach sustainability with their communities. And by that, I mean ensuring that the people remain in place. And that goes into the context of both anti gentrification and anti displacement campaigns. And so our values are then accessibility, collaboration, education, inclusion, and social justice. So the three main ways that we do this, as I've been kind of referencing, is one, we have the Black Preservation Stories podcast. So we often travel across the United States, interviewing different historic preservation projects that are descendant led, to figure out how they like what their arc was, their challenges are, their stories, and most importantly, in some cases, the lessons that they learned, which can then be understood and used by other people who may be interested in engaging their own preservation projects or who might be engaged in similar preservation projects. The second part of this is the Black Roots Across America interactive mapping database. Right now, it has a little over 400 sites or documented projects across the United States related to Black heritage and cultural preservation, which is inclusive of cemeteries, HBCUs, schools, and as I mentioned, anti-gentrification displacement campaigns, and most often and most commonly museums, which could be talked about a lot, which often adaptive reuse historic structures, as in the case of Great Barrington, where I am, in order to tell the community histories and the broader history of the nation. And then one thing we also have is our grant resources database. So on our website, we try to accrue as much information about the different grants available for people wanting to engage in Black historic preservation and heritage preservation, broken down regionally and across state lines. So this is just a few examples of the Black Reservation Stories podcast, and I don't want to go into detail about them all, but this includes sites like the National Black Doll Museum of African American History and Culture in Attleboro, Massachusetts, the Kingston Zion AME Church in New York, the Scott Ford House is incorporated in Jackson, Mississippi, who focus on preserving the histories of Black midwifery and are interpreting two historic homes where Black midwives live, and then also Friends of the Tanner House in uh, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, preserving the and restoring the property of Henry Ossawa Tanner, who's a famous artist known for the banjo lesson and the thankful poor, in addition to the excellence in this entire family. And generally, we try to answer or explore one broad question we think is relevant to the contemporary lives of people who are engaged in this work. That is, how can community memory serve as a tool for social justice? What's been lost with the erosion of Black maternal care-based traditions, and how could recovering the history of Black women's midwifery inform how we understand reproductive justice today? How can preserving a historic home empower a community? And what does restoration mean when the goal also includes service to people facing housing insecurity and unmet needs? So one of the key things about BGHPN is, as I mentioned, we try to be as place-based as possible. So we want our faces to be seen. We want to be involved in the community where this work is going on. And one of the things I often say is that the first conversation, or the interview is often the first conversation, but not the last. And equally so, the conversation before and after the interview are equally important. And so this is just a kind of a few examples of some of the episodes that we feature. Also, some that are on the way in terms of we publish next across the country, whether it be North Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, Alabama, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Mississippi. And we just announced our board of directors last week. And one of the things I'm very proud of and excited to say is that the number of the people who make up our board of directors are also people who we initially interviewed for the podcast. So it was always a sense of community from the beginning with the conversation that we're establishing. And the last thing I want to talk about is the interactive map, which we're constantly updating, we're developing. It has GPS integration. It's free to use. So that means you could land in any state in the country, any city, type in the address near you, and find all the Black museums or historic sites, projects that you can engage in, view, and witness. So we have about 400 now, and it's growing. And this is directly tied to the podcasting and community based efforts in a way, because we have 15 episodes published on the podcast. But what I like to say is that that means with the 400 sites that we do have, we have 375 more interviews to go. So I'm excited to have been working with Kennedy and to have the opportunity to share the BGHP with you all.
So, what is the Transformative Preservation Guide and how can you use it? First, who's the primary audience for Black Historic Preservation's guide? When publishing a book or digital archive, the team and their sponsors do their best to understand the audience for the product they are developing. In the case of this guide, a guide specific to Black preservationist experiences in historic preservation and for addressing with a language of precision who caused the harm. The audience is the dominant demographic of the field, so white preservationists. And the aspiration for communicating to this audience is to communicate what is possible for their imagination of possibilities, what is possible to provide for Black preservationists and for the preservation of Black historic sites, with justification for the provisions, linking a transformative action directly with a harm they as an individual or as a white-lit organization are proposing and to address. What might not be clear is that a guide like this is for white and Black preservationists alike. Because we all participate in the preservation hierarchy and reinforce it. For Black people, it is for us to treat ourselves with empathy, compassion, to, in essence, deprogram ourselves from the behavior that we tend to associate with anti-Blackness that Black people are also not immune to embodying. And to provide additional people like myself who make requests that will evolve the field forward and that center care and respect and agency of Black people in this space. This guide puts into action my last Substack essay entitled What's Missing from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion DEI Downfall Discourse. And that what's missing was what I just shared, is that there has been a lack of framing the provisions of diversity, equity, inclusion, that they are aligning with addressing past harm and present harm and potential future harms as well. With few exceptions, existing historic preservation guides shy away from specifics about the inequities surrounding the preservation of African American historic sites and matriculation and retention of Black preservationists in the field. We've had plenty of books and guides that describe the problem, triage, and diagnose it for reasons such as fear of making our white peers and colleagues in preservation uncomfortable, for telling them that they need to give something up or give up more than what they have already offered to give, or fear of offending our Black peers and colleagues in preservation for saying that they are not helping address the problem when they center white people's comfort, out of a response for centering their own comfort and protection as well in the field. It's important to acknowledge that. These guides do not communicate with historical precision about who has harmed Black people or the preservation of Black historic sites, or offer actionable items that might upset the status quo. For example, one guide states that they are, quote, empowering Black people to preserve sites associated with Black history. And this is language also used in the promotion of grants for the preservation of Black historic sites. However, statements like this fail to mention that Black people are already empowered, have been empowered to preserve sites, have been preserving historic sites since our existence in this country. that we've been preservation. The actual issue is that the dominant demographic in the field, white preservationists, have historically ignored Black preservationists, not taken their scholarship seriously, not framed their work as the work of a preservationist, require additional labor of them to prove their facts and observations, required perfection, and more, with the limited chance of them taking seriously the credentialed Black person such as an architect. And even as a credentialed architect, peers, clients, and colleagues in architecture and preservation, white and Black alike, have challenged my voice and authority in the field. It is what Laura Jane Smith, researcher based in Australia, refers to as the authorized heritage discourse, as being a barrier to an equitable and inclusive preservation field. The people who participate in the authorized heritage discourse tend to be an authorized voice, meaning credentialed and or degreed. And I'll add that the credentials also include financial and social currency or status. Another guide blames the, quote, failure to conserve African American historic sites on euphemisms like America and even preservation, instead of communicating the blame with language of historical precision. And an example of this precision is to say the failure to preserve sites with known African American history is due to white-led harmful acts in the past of white preservationists, white funders, and other white professionals ignoring Black people's contributions to US history. Another guide states that Black people need training, but fails to mention that everyone of all backgrounds need training in preservation. For example, seasoned consultants who want to enter a new market, the historic preservation market, and they might not have any formal education training in preservation. So this formal training in preservation might be beneficial to them to succeed in this new venture. And the last example that you might find this language in a guide, and I have found this language in a guide, and it's not only a guide, again, it's also grant programs to support preserving Black historic sites. They'll include contributions from Black preservationists of the top tier of the preservation hierarchy, or Black preservationists who are concentrated in other parts of the hierarchy, instead of incorporating the diverse perspectives of Black preservationists from across the hierarchy. In essence, most guides address preserving sites associated with known African American history and sustaining Black preservationists in the field with what's called first order solutions if they address either or both at all. Second order solutions is a business model that counters the quick first order solution to a more sustainable approach that interrogates the consequences of solutions. For preservation, this looks like not only giving money to Black-led nonprofits to preserve Black heritage sites, but a migration toward a sustainable model of financial support, plus supporting Black people's agency in preservation by referring to us leading the preservation of these sites, respecting our intelligence, and more that is covered in the Transformative Preservation Guide, thus breaking away from a charity model for Black historic sites and Black preservationists. We become the authorized voice with the implementation of second order solutions that we're calling transformative actions. Columbia Historic Preservation professor Erica Avrami adopted this term, second order, to her 2024 publication that proposes heritage policy change as a sustainable approach to address social justice and climate action in the field, and is a source we cite as inspiration for the Transformative Preservation Guide as a best practice model to follow. Look to second order solutions to evolve preservation. This guide is the product of a collaborative effort grounded in the 20+ years of education and experience of its lead author, myself. Throughout these 20 years or so plus, I have participated in each layer of the hierarchy, and my experience is not the only one represented in the guide. From there, we incorporated a research good best practice with a survey of the target voice we are centering in this guide, which is the voice of the Black adult preservationists. Next, I collaborated with Marcus Smith, the founder of Grassroots Heritage Preservation Network, on the development of key findings, as well as the draft, incorporating key findings from the survey, literature, research, and other research on the experiences of Black adults in preservation into the draft. We are now in the last phase of development of the final report that has also been peer reviewed. That workshop kiloWatt will publish as early as the second week of June. So thank you to those who pre-ordered. A transformative justice or transformative preservation framework is the main structure of the guide, where we present the key findings as the harms, such as too much white control and preservation, followed by transformative actions to address the harms. To not perpetuate further harm by spending our energy producing another document that raises awareness with no accountability for action on the awareness, we invite people and institutions to share in a shared document called an accountability tracker shared in this transformative preservation guide, how they are incorporating the transformative actions into their preservation practice. And as a measure of accountability, if you do not commit to implementing a transformative action within 1 year of purchase with an implementation timeline, we will refund the purchase price of the guide to you. We are that committed to transformative change in preservation. How a transformative justice framework differs from a more commonly used phrase of restorative justice is that the transformative actions of a transformative justice or transformative preservation framework supports system or policy changes. In other words, transformative justice provides solutions at the root cause of interpersonal or localized harms. So in outsider preservation, in everyday life, what this looks like is restorative justice leads to reparative action of, say, community service or financial reparations for someone who stole something from a corner store or literally extracted labor from people in a country, such as Black people in the United States, for financial reparations. However, this compared to transformative preservation or transformative justice in that the transformative action is a policy change. And so an example of that is financial reparations plus employment opportunities for a person who resorted to committing a crime to fulfill their basic human needs. The guide is a digital interactive guide. Clicking on the text in the sidebars will send you to other sections in the guide. If you are connected to the internet, clicking on images will open a website where you will learn more about the image and provide more context about the harm or the transformative action. For example, on this page, we are reading about the archival harms of describing something in a museum collection as an object. And the second harm on this page relating to archival harms addresses not including the provenance or origin of the archived item in the provenance statement. And so clicking on the button at the bottom of the page will lead you directly to the transformative action that we propose in the guide to address the harm. In this case, this is to practice archival preservation by referring to objects, an archival item term as a belonging. And referring to it as a belonging associates the archival item with ownership or emotional attachment to an actual human and a person. And for more insight from Black preservationists from across the country on challenges related to this topic and others from different parts of the preservation hierarchy, you can click on the appendix in the right-hand side of the page, the link here. and it leads you directly to the appendix section. And then from there, we're still on archival preservation. So clicking on archival preservation will lead you to the 2 questions that were in our 2025 survey that we asked Black preservationists from across the country to share their thoughts on a variety of topics such as archival preservation and some of the challenges and opportunities they see for supporting archival preservation relating to the preservation of Black historic sites. With a transformative preservation framework, Black and Historic Preservation's Guide offers to the preservation field transformative action steps that address harms Black preservationists have experienced from white preservationists and Black preservationists alike to move us as a collective toward a more sustainable, equitable field. It counters the norm and status quo, first-order solutions with second-order actions. These second-order actions center Black preservationists and sites with known Black history, yet they will have benefits to everyone in the field. To put my science hat on and use my chemistry degree here, an equitable society or truly equitable preservation is one at equilibrium, and equilibrium benefits everyone. So I'll now bring Marcus back to the stage where we will discuss the guide before answering any questions you might have. And we'll also read any initial feedback you've shared in the Q&A section. So I will stop sharing. Is it good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So Marcus, tell me a bit about what inspired you to collaborate on the Transformative Preservation Guide.
So to speak on it, well, first thing I should say is that before I even started the BGHPN, I was already following Kennedy's work. And I remember even encountering a podcast episode I think you had done a while back with, it's like, I forgot, it was about the importance of language. And I think you were speaking about unredacted facts. And we met at a conference at the University of Pennsylvania, a symposium talking about, I believe, preservation futures. And there we kind of had an opportunity to discuss, and I think we had a very good conversation at lunch about the mindset we had towards the preservation, the respective work that we were doing, being introduced by a mutual colleague. And so around this time, I was conceiving of the idea of BGHPN, but it quite hadn't materialized yet. So for reference, this is November of 2024. And then BGHPN was founded in May of 2025. And so when I announced and launched BGHPN, I believe that Kennedy is one of the first people I reached out to. And I think it was also a kind of a natural instinct, not only out of respect for her work, but also my organization was focused on primarily, grassroots advocates, people doing the work. And then Kennedy had built this database of Black historic preservation professionals. And so that combination, and I think that kind of natural combination is what intrigued me. And I think our I think our moral vision, I like to say, and our emphasis on the needs of Black preservationists in the field very much aligned. And so when I was asked to join that title board and be involved in this project, I was happy to do so. And there's a lot I can say about it, but I am absolutely blown away by the results of what we've been able to produce in terms of this editing process, the whole 140 pages of it. So that's what inspired me: respect for the work and a shared vision.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's been a great collaboration, and looking forward to publishing the guide in a couple of weeks.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to ask you, Kennedy, if I can.
Sure.
One of the things that it kind of excites me about the guide, and I think we talked about this a few days ago, is the range in terms of how you identify who preservation practitioners are and how this guide is also meant for them. I was wondering if you can kind of speak on that about, I mean, if you referenced the idea of especially people of color, people who are also outside of traditional architecture, to claim the title of preservationist and how that's meant for them.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I'm actually pulling from our last member talk and the conversation that I had with Dr. Dudley and also Dr. Whetstone, that claiming the word preservationist for the work that we do across the what I have proposed is this preservation hierarchy. It legitimizes our existence in the field, especially considering what I've been leading right now for our bin preservation program. That I've been inspired and continued kind of shock and wow, oh, I didn't know that um, that that we have been preserving historic sites and engaging in different ways of engaging in preservation, like tour guides or, of course, being owners of buildings, as well as fundraising for the preservation of sites. However, it's that framework of calling us preservationists has been missing in the archives. Like I said, especially for historic figures that people might be very familiar with as being historians, but they're historians inside of historic buildings that they have been preserving and working on, like Dr. Carter G. Woodson. So for me, it's really important for us to view ourselves as preservationists, because then we view ourselves as belonging and legitimizing the work that we are doing. And it's not just the preserving of the building. It's a yes and to preserving the building, but also the stories that we are telling about these sites and places, not just building, but places as well. Because I say, as a preservation architect, a key component of the work of preserving the structure of the building, oftentimes it's understanding the story and the change over time of that site. And so it takes a collective community of different people and what they can contribute, what they are contributing to preservation as well.
Yeah, and when you've talked about this when in your presentation as well, but over the course of developing the guide, there was that shift from first talking about restorative justice to transformative. Can you speak a bit more about that, the intentionality between that shift and how that applies to preservation more broadly, as you see it?
Yeah. The challenge with restorative justice as a framework is that it it addresses localized issues. It's a to use a very loose term, it's a band-aid to an issue. And I was reflecting on this some more yesterday, and it's we can restore a building, but sometimes the use changes. That's a key component of historic preservation. We adaptively reuse a building. So what happens when the community or the organization moves on from the building that they were invested a ton of time and energy into preserving, and they decide that they no longer want to use the building. They want to sell it. They want to make a profit, in order to invest it into another site. They are still Black preservationists, and they still need support, and they still need support in their agency and being respected as authorized voices in the field. And I'm finding that continues to be lacking. And in essence, it's respecting the individual, the people, the human, as well as the actions and the work that we are doing in preserving the sites. And that's what this transformative action framework pushes us towards, is developing policy that supports us as individuals. Another to leap into the transformative actions, that's we cover wealth equity, making sure that conference and event hosts are financially compensating Black presenters, and if they have the budget, or request additional funds in your grants to make sure that you're compensating your Black presenters a little higher than your white presenters, to allow for compensating for the emotional labor that we extend in being maybe the only Black person presenting on a topic such as window restoration. Or we might be actually talking about uh, racial equity. And so we are facing an audience that's majority white, And we are not only talking about a topic, but then we are also talking about a topic that's a professional topic, but it's a topic that's very personal for us. And so topic, things like that they pivot us away from, and then they build that into the policy and the practice moving forward year after year, as opposed to being a one-time thing, but actually being a part of supporting our financial well-being as well. So I close tonight's session with the same quote I opened with from James Baldwin about the role of the artist, with a 21st century addendum to it from director, writer, and artist Boots Riley, where he, to co-opt language from improv comedy, yes ands Mr. Baldwin by, in essence, saying that the role of the artist is to not only shine a light, but to also hold people accountable for taking action on their new raised awareness, their new enlightenment. Riley's sentiment also applies to this transformative preservation guide we present to you from Blackness Art Preservation. So stay tuned for our Juneteenth event announcement. And I thank you to those who pre-ordered and again expect to receive your copy by the second week of June. And so thank you and good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.